Um, this is more of a presentation of a concept than a tool. There's no tools involved here, although I'll give some examples. Um, for a number of years, people have been struggling with the concept of single sourcing content. And it's something that has been evolving in the background. There are a lot of tools that might be out there that can contribute to part of this, but very often new tools come along and new capabilities come along, and somehow the content gets disconnected from a single source. The training is separate from the operations. The operations is separate from the maintenance. The follow-on skills development is not consistent with the job aids and so on. So I just want to present here the idea of single sourcing as a backdrop for any of the development that you're going to be doing, particularly if you live in and work in a regulated environment, which is where we do all of our work. So this may seem a little bit low tech, but the whole concept here is if all of the content and the materials that you're working with are consistently coming from a single source and you're in a regulated industry, you're in trouble. So there's a few questions that we address, that we look at when we're trying to create some kind of support for this. And that's how you can reduce the cost it takes to produce your standards. Now remember, we're in a standardized industry like pharmaceuticals or finance, maybe hospital or government or emergency. They all have standards that have to be documented. They have to be made available for the regulatory agency, and you have to guarantee your compliance with them. So one of the areas is, well, how can we create this in a single source? And then how does that affect training? How can I quickly go to training without starting all over again to create a training program from something that I just spent a mountain of time documenting as a standard? So this concept of single sourcing, I want to define it for you. We want to be able to gather the content into a single location. We want to be able to organize it in what we call meaningful chunks or critical clusters of knowledge. We need to store it in a repository that can be accessible in a variety of manners. And you must be able to generate multiple views of that information for multiple uses. And so a single source approach in a regulated industry turns out to be a really critical kind of path to follow. What does it look like? Typically, there are some 3 components that you want to consider for any system that you're going to be developing. You must have input models that are structured and mimicked according to the kind of information that you're collecting, maybe protocols for hospital or standard operating procedures for manufacturing, or work instructions if you're working in a pharmaceutical company in a clean room and turning a product over. These all have to be well defined, and the content that defines them has to be collected with some kind of input model structure. Once it's collected, it has to be put into a data structure. That's a database or a data structure related to that information. So things are meta tagged and are organized, and you have procedures, and you have principles, and you might have processes and facts and questions and so on. So you need a structured database that'll accept this content and tag it so that it can be reused. And when it's reused, it has to go out as maybe just an accessible knowledge base, or a user guide, or a job aid, or a checklist, or a set of training slides, or an online lesson. These are all parts of the automatic regeneration or generation of support materials for the standard that you're trying to define. So I'm just going to kind of go through that process with you and show you some examples of that. When we think of outputs, we're thinking of manufacturing and operations and maintenance and government issue. So there are work instructions that are required for all of the procedural process-oriented tasks, right? And they have to be followed properly, and the person who's following them needs to know exactly what they need to do. So while someone might be trained and very well to operate a piece of equipment, there's often times when there's cross-training or new hires or someone's filling in, they have to have work instructions that are easy to follow and ones that they can share with others when they're not there and they're being covered. Training and support materials are critical. It's nice to have a really robust training program, but that program better reflect the latest standard operating procedure with the latest piece of equipment. And if the procedure changes or the equipment changes, then the training has to change accordingly, and it can't take months for that to happen. It has to happen almost the next day or the next time this is used. And of course, assessment tools are critical to know when people are task qualified, when they do or don't have the right skill set. So it could take a variety of different forms, and you want the information that you're collecting to be usable in a variety of different ways. So it might be visual job aids, it might be online tutorials, it could be checklists, maybe PowerPoint slides with a leader guide. So any of the blended or direct training, performance support, job aid method for implementing a standard operating procedure, A, it has to be consistent with the SOP, but B, it has to allow the person to implement it properly, or the SOP really doesn't have much meaning. So when you're thinking of a single sourcing system, you basically have to create, and there's a variety of ways of doing this, but you have to create a platform that will allow you to establish, in our case, we set some criteria for the information we're collecting when we do it. Things should be easy to learn. If you're going to be operating some equipment or following a software program or whatever, they must be easy to remember. And that means it can't be too much information, but it can't be too little. It can't just be data. It has to be information and knowledge. It has to be when and where you want it to be accessible, on a phone, on a tablet, on a lab, could be printed out and pinned to the machine or whatever. And everything has to be in sync. And that's probably the most critical of all of the requirements. And if you work in a regulated industry, in a hospital or a pharmaceutical company, and your materials are not in sync with your standard operating procedures, you get fined tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is very costly if you're not going to attend to that particular aspect of it. It's nice to use task definitions, pictures, graphics, any of the things we've talked about today that can be created. If you have them and they're assets that are available, use them. If you put them into a single system, then you can generate from that single system the support materials, the control documents that are going to be audited by the inspector, a task qualification for the supervisor to make sure the employee really understands how to do the job and can be, I like to say, right, driving a forklift's not a multiple choice test, right? So they have to be able to observe you doing the job properly. At Merck, you can't go into a clean room unless you're task qualified. The objective here, the benefit of that, is we end up with improved coverage, of course, because we're attending to all of the standards, not just a few of the most popular ones. We're going to reduce the time and the cost to produce these if we can do it automatically from a single source. And from a compliance point of view, and again, we work in regulated industries almost exclusively, that's critical. You have to be able to support any kind of representation. It could be a document, a PDF, an HTML, a PowerPoint, video, whatever it might be. And the one critical aspect of this is you need to write it once so you can use it many. And that's what single sourcing is. And we have developed a system that does that on a very simple basis, but it achieves dramatic kinds of impact on the companies that implement this or something like this. So one of the benefits of approaching a single sourcing system is you start to think about design, formatting, and writing standards. So what we know, we're all L&D people, we're all knowledge transfer people. We know that design and format is critical. And if you can give some guidelines to the people who are actually generating the content, that is very helpful, particularly for people who might be giving you information from a maintenance point of view or from a quality point of view, and they're not used to writing in a complete structured way. You need to give them some kind of help. But if you can standardize your design, if you can standardize your format, and if you can provide guided writing outline or structured forms, you can automate the process of getting this information in quickly. And when you generate the output, you know it's going to run, you know it can be maintained, and you can create all of the kind of support materials that is required to actually implement the procedure. So not only the job aids and training, but PowerPoint, web-based training, even score and conformant modules you can put into the Learning LMS, or documents you can publish directly into SharePoint for document management and control. So really what this slide is attempting to present is it's a think of these things in advance, design, format, and writing standards, operationalize them in some structured format, and then implement them in a single sourcing mode so that when you make a change to a standard, you add a lockout, tagout, you add a quality sign off, you only go back to the original source, make that change, regenerate everything, and everything's up to speed. So here's an example of what it takes, like using some kind of a generative system. Or what a lot of companies do is they'll create their standard, then they have another department create the job aids and the guide, then they have another department create the training, and someone else does the assessment. Well, by the time you're done, you've already doubled your time and doubled your money. And when a change has to be made, you're really held hostage to that because you have to go back and retrace all your steps. So a single sourcing system allows you to, and we did this is just one little project that we ran. It saved considerable amount of time and money, whatever that might be, hourly rates of people at the time and so forth, but it was substantial. And because of this, they were able to move forward with let's say, a lower cost, higher productive process. This works in a variety of industries. Let's see, all pharmaceutical, life skills, agribusiness, manufacturing, government, and so on. Here's just some of the companies we've worked with, from nuclear to ADM to USDA and so forth. They all have different requirements, but they're all looking for some single sourcing of their content so they can implement and create performance support materials to get them to be productive. From an architectural point of view, if you consider this for implementing it, and by the way, let me just say our approach to it has been, on the 80-20 rule of developing things, we're looking for the 20% effort that gives us 80% of the impact. So I won't call it low tech, but we're not on the cutting edge of technology. We're applying what's there right now to get the biggest impact. So we actually operate in this kind of world within Office 365. And we use something like SharePoint as our document management system. And we automatically package things into an LMS that is already at the client's site. So what the client ends up doing is putting their content into a form or an input model. We create a database from that for them. We automatically generate whatever the regulated requirement is, the SOP or the policy or the protocol. We'll generate a user guide and a task qualification standard for the supervisors, as well as job aids and checklists for every procedure, and PowerPoint slides and web-based training to go along with that. That can be published either in these management systems like SharePoint or TrainTracks or LMS, or we can build an index on a shared drive that somebody can access from an iPad or a phone or a tablet. So when we implement a system like single sourcing, we actually provide our subject matter experts with policies, SOPs, work instructions, protocols, process maps. These models are set up ahead of time. And because we're working in Office 365, we're simply using Word. which is the simplest way for people to write the documents that they have to write anyway. But we do it in such a way that we're organizing it and tagging it along the way so that we can regenerate and repurpose any of the output materials we have here. So the process that we would follow to get to a single source environment in a Office 365, but by the way, it could be a very small company of 20 people. It could be a large manufacturing company of 1,000 users. It's just a matter of working within the platform that they have on their desktop right now that they can take advantage of. So we would input the information, we would complete the definition of the requirements, and then we would generate all of the outputs for them. So I'm not looking at the chat here. If someone can see the chat on this, I can perhaps answer some questions that might be there as well.
Nothing on the chat yet, but feel free to ask questions.
Okay. Let me see. I kind of jumped out of my presentation here, but Julia, just let me know if I'm sharing the right screen here.
Yeah, we see one of your tabs.
Yeah, can you see the normal shutdown procedure here? For
Yep.
Okay, this is one client that we work with. I'm just going to use this to grab some of the examples. We help them create what we call a master document. So it was in Word. They wrote the work instruction for this particular piece of equipment. This is a very expensive piece of equipment, a few $1,000,000. It's operated. They have requirements for documentation. There's a shutdown procedure that has to be followed. But when the person operating got sick, someone had to cover. Then they had to train that person. And we just they wanted to be prepared for any kind of eventuality for shutting down the equipment properly without causing any problems. So we help them build a work instruction as a standard document. Now, I'm in Word. This isn't too fancy. I'm just using Word templates here, where we're able to put in headers and footers for the control document purposes. You have requirements for SOPs, policies, and so forth. We can link to any kind of reference materials that are available, and we can walk them through the process, how they would turn down or shut down this piece of equipment, step by step, in a simple document format.
Peter, we have a quick question.
Sure.
This is from Tom. He says, awesome. What industry are your clients in? Finance, pharma?
Yes, most of them are, again, regulated finance, Merck, BMS, J&J, those kind of customers. Financial, like Prudential or someone like that. A government, we do all of the SOPs and training for the entire city of Houston Public Works that handles flooding and water removal and those kinds of things. And food and beverage manufacturing. So these are highly regulated industries that when you go to work in, you have to follow the rules or you get fined by OSHA or ISO or somebody else, or FDA if it's pharmaceutical. And so we're always looking at getting the best definition of what that task is and then packaging up in as many different formats as we can. So for example, we built for the new hires, we built a guide with all the information they needed. It was on an iPad. They could take it home. They could print it out. They could have it with them. Before you show up to do this, you should go through this guide, and we're going to have a workshop with some slides and a person in the front of the room walk you through this. And it's exactly the same material that would be in the approved, regulated work instruction SOP. If you're working in this area and you're out in the field and you're in the room and you're saying, how do I shut that down? Well, maybe we could build a job aid. So this automatically builds a little 2-column PDF download on your iPad, job aid to walk you through every step with cautions and warnings and anything that goes along the way. By the way, it's all branded for the customer. This is a food and beverage company, and They're very colorful with flowers, but it was the branding that we did for them with this tool. This checklist and other things that go along the way. There's a, let me see if this is the one I want here. This is another view that we create for them. They'll put this on a shared drive, and it could be accessed by anybody, not necessarily PowerPoint, not necessarily an LMS. There's no overhead and labor and registering and everything. It's just go to the site, look at the material that you need, and they can search with the search engine for whatever they're looking for. And if they want to shut down this piece of equipment, this job aid is available to them. And if they want to look at the actual guide, it's here. All the materials available to them right from some simple little shared system. So what I want to show you is how we did it, okay? Because just one example, I'm going to go to our dashboard. And here's a place where we put all of the different SOPs that we're working on at any time. And from this dashboard, when you've written them, we have the options to publish them to SharePoint or publish them to a shared drive or automatically post them somewhere. And we have the ability to archive or stage or build different indices for them automatically from here. The one I want to show you isn't on this particular one, so I'm going to browse to the one I want to show you. This is the document that we created to generate the kinds of things I was just showing you, and it sits in Word. So this is the Word version of the document. And by the way, it's let me just go to the top here. It's a document. It has a title and a name. And in our system, we have all kinds of controls. So for this particular document, we would have, let me see, let me go here. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on a minute. Let me go back here. Can I show this? I've got some kind of a tag in the middle of my screen here, so it's just bothering me a little bit. Maybe if I do it. Hang on a minute, Juliet. I opened up something that I can't close.
No worries. There's also a comment in the chat. It says, great to be able to use software most people already have. That's from Jenny.
Right. So I'm trying to simply get back to here and here. And it's something's not active. I got to close this 1 second, please, if I can. Give me 1 minute, folks. I just I have something open twice, so.
No worries. If you have any questions for Peter, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm not sure how many of you work in the very regulated industry. I certainly did in the past working for pharma.
I'm going to open this again and see if it comes up for our review here.
Okay.
It's down on my Word icon if it populates here for me. It's grabbing it from the database, getting the Word version and making it available. So here we go. Okay. So yeah, this is better. You can see all of our icons at the top for doing things. So and of course this is let me do this. I've got a control bar that's blocking my view of my own tabs here. So I apologize for not being at it. It's on the wrong screen. So we'll go that far. So this document has in it, it's a Word document. All we did was fill it in with the right information. And for example, we put in all of the linked documents. We put in the responsibilities of the individuals. And here we have a list of steps for a procedure for shutdown. We have the details for any step. You can have as many details as you want for any step along the way. For step number 3, this is what you need to do, and so on. And what we did was we have the ability to build from this, I showed you the guide and the SOP and the job aid, but let's say we wanted to build a, we wanted to build a PowerPoint slide to go with this so I could generate and look at the information. So let's see if it's going to do this for me. Yeah. No, that's okay. So it's going to build the slides that I need to do training. I don't know if you can see this on your screen or not, but it's going through grabbing information that's important, grabbing each step, grabbing the description down below, grabbing the picture above, putting it together in a presentation so that if I had somebody coming in, a new hire or a cross trainer, and I had a specialist, we could walk through these steps together. We even added some questions with some feedback at the end. So if I finish that right now, 5 minutes from now, I could go across the hall and run this workshop. So if you're in one of those industries where you don't have a lot of lead time, you have some information, if you're writing your information into a single source form to begin with, you should be able to generate these things quickly. And if I change something, I can regenerate it and I would have the updated version. Well, okay, that's nice. PowerPoint's nice. Wouldn't it be nice if we could, I don't know, generate an online lesson that would go with this in HTML that I could put in my SCORM conformant learning management system? So, well, it actually did it. So let me go look at it now. It created it. I know it took a while, but so it created, like, oh, come on. It's on my other screen and I can't get at it. Oh, sorry, folks. 1 minute. Well, I'm running out of time, I think, here. So I did want to show you it running a web-based lesson, but it's apparently, I have 2 screens and my screens are confused. So we'll leave it at that. You should be able to, if you're in a regulated industry, you should be thinking about single sourcing. That's the main thing here. Our little experience was we have some tools that do that. You should be working with tools that are on the desktop right now. You should be able to generate standard fare. And if you're creating training or job aids or performance support, you shouldn't have to rewrite it every time. You should be able to generate it all at once. So let me leave it at that. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to follow up with those at the end. Time being as it is, Juliet, I think my time is up. So.
Well, thank you, Peter. I think, just that image of the single source populating all of the PowerPoint in itself, that's pretty impressive. I wish I had that when I was in school or whatever, just like hundreds of documents that I had to manage. So yeah, no, this is really amazing. We wish we could have seen the webinar, the course part of it, but we'll maybe one day, another day.
Sure.
So if